And we're kicking off this session with one of the most pressing and fascinating topics in the AI and media landscape today, the relationship between publishers and AI actors. As generative AI becomes more powerful, becomes widely used, questions around content attribution, licensing, fair compensation have never been more important. So how do we ensure that the content fueling AI system is not only high quality, but also properly credited and monetized? That is exactly what our next speaker works on every day. Please welcome Josh Freeman, who is Vice President of Business Development at ProRata.ai, a company building on an infrastructure that allows generative AI platforms to attribute contributing content sources and share revenues on per-use basis. Please welcome Josh Freeman.
Thanks, Marie, and thanks to the organizers for having me come over. ProRata is a company that is a mission-driven company. Our focus is on ensuring that we can protect and advance human creativity in the era of generative AI. Obviously, as you all know, we're living in a wild, disruptive time. Generative AI is powerful, it's transformative. It also represents a potential extinction event for content creators. And we're seeing this incredible pace of transformation. Last year, $1 billion a day was being invested into AI solutions, with adoption of AI faster in history than adoption of the internet, and faster than PCs. And powering this adoption is the shift to what I would think of as the third era of search. We've moved from the traditional search index to keyword search, now to AI search, or as others are starting to term it, answer search. And we should be clear, answer search, generative AI search, it is transformational. It does create significant value for users. But I would believe that it does so if and only if high-quality content is available to power these answers. If high-quality content is excluded, whether through technology or through litigation or through extinction, then we know what happens. These answer engines tell you to put glue on your pizza, they tell you to chew rocks or anything else that they can dredge up from the bowels of Reddit. So ProRata began from this relatively simple question. How do we make generative search, answer search, fair and sustainable for content creators? Because what we believe is that everyone benefits from a sustainable ecosystem. The generative AIs, the content creators, and ultimately, the end user. You all are feeling this every day, but the data is increasingly showing that the historical value exchange between search and content creation has collapsed. So this is data from Cloudflare. We've seen very similar data from Tollbit. Initially, Google was crawling 2 pages of your content for every 1 visitor they sent to you. Today, it's 6 to 1. ChatGPT is crawling 250 pages for every 1 visitor that they're sending to content creators. And what they've said is Anthropic, it's about 6,000 to 1. I was at an event a couple of weeks ago with one of the large technology companies where they essentially admitted that they are brute force crawling every page on your sites every day because it is more efficient for them to crawl everything than do a delta crawl. And we know what the impact is on your DevOps people, on your costs as they're doing it. And in fact, I would argue even as this value exchange is collapsing, the original value exchange was never actually fair. For those of us who were involved as Google was arising, traffic for search was never fair. We never understood at the time how much value was being created on that page before the traffic was sent out. But the flaw today is really in the business model. Today, what we hear, because they say it, and we can watch in their actions, is that the Gen AI providers barely even pretend that they value your content. They treat it with disdain. They treat it as their birthright. They treat it as tonnage for their models. For those of us from the US side, we know that they are now arguing that this is a national security threat. And if they are not given wholesale access to every piece of content ever created on the web, the US is going to die some horrible, awful death at the hands of the Chinese. AI to date, honestly, has been powered by the largest intellectual property theft in history. And on the US side and a bit in the UK and other places, It's resulted in predictable litigation by the content owners. We believe that Gen AI without compensation is going to remove both the motivation and the monetization that enables the creation of quality content. That's why this is so urgent. I've spoken to and worked with a number of people in this room. We feel that there is an urgency, that there is 18 or 24 months during which these business models are going to be set for the next generation of search. And we as an industry, as collectively and individually, have to do everything we can to shift that. So why is it that creators share in almost all other forms of digitization, where there are highly profitable platforms sharing significant revenues with thriving creator ecosystems on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music, in the app stores, but it's not happening in generative AI? From our perspective, it's really for two reasons. First is they just don't want to. These technology companies do not want to share their revenues with you, and they're going to do everything that they can to prevent it. And what we're hearing, and what I know not many of you know, is they're telling the regulators and the legislators that it's not possible, that technologically they can't easily track and share these revenues. And sort of maybe that was true up to a point. It's really hard to share something that you can't count. You can count a stream, you can count a download, you can count a view. With generative AI, it's certainly, as we were starting out, it was like taking a whole set of ingredients, throwing it in the blender, pouring out a bowl of soup, offering it up and saying, sorry, this was actually made by my grandmother in the kitchen according to her secret recipe. I can't tell you what's gone in it. And if I don't know what's gone in it, it's very hard to compensate you for it. So that's where we've started at ProRata.ai, with the development of an algorithm that can identify the relative contribution to a generative response that enables a pay-per-use business model for the industry. If you can count it, you can share it. So our North Star is to license this attribution capability across the industry, ensuring that every generative response and every generative response is attributed, and every content creator is fairly and proportionately compensated when their IP is used to generate a response, powering a vibrant ecosystem. We've started with text, but it works for images, it works for music, it works for video. But if we go back to the question of they just don't wanna, why is anyone gonna license this technology from us? Well, it's going to be a whole series of efforts. In some places, it will be driven by regulation and legislation. In some places, it may be driven by litigation. And in some places, it'll be driven both by individual and collective negotiations. But the first thing that you need is a proof point. So the first thing we've done is launch Gist.ai, which is an ethical AI search engine that credits and pays content owners every time their content is used to generate a response. Our goal is that Gist should show the way forward. It is the reference point for the regulators, for the legislators, for the litigators, for the content creators to know that this is possible. It's driven entirely by licensed content partnerships. Till now, we've done about 75 partnerships for nearly 500 publication titles. We expect by next year that'll be in the thousands. Every one of these content creators, by their actions, is endorsing and supporting a proportional pay-per-use business model for the industry. We have also entered into strategic partnerships. So in the US, we're partnered with the News Media Alliance, which has recommended to all 2,200 of their members that they become partners with ProRata. In the UK, we're partnered with the PPA, and here in Denmark, we're partnered with the DPCMO and with Karen, who'll be up on stage shortly. Reflecting on one of the things that Ezra said yesterday, we should remember, partnerships are a choice by these companies. If you're a $300 billion company and you only have 5 people in your partnerships team, that's a choice, and it's a choice that reflects your priorities. OpenAI has chosen to do only 1 or 2 partnerships per country. They could do more if they wanted to, but that's their choice, and I hope, as we've talked about with Maria a little bit, we can hear differing perspectives and approaches in the couch section. We can talk a little bit about the Danish approach thus far and a little bit about some of the other choices made. But on GIST itself, you get credit every time your content is used. We provide clear attribution indicating what proportion of an answer has come from what source. And the citations are real. Many of you may have seen the Columbia Journalism Review report in the last couple weeks that on the other sites, up to 50% of the citations in their answers are hallucinated. This actually is double theft of your property, because not only have they taken your content without compensation to create these answers, not only has the traffic coming from search in general diminished, but the fact that they are hallucinating citations to your content is in fact providing the attribution, the legitimization of those answers that gives users the comfort that they don't actually have to click through and discover that that link was hallucinated to begin with. So up at the top, I know it's hard to see, is the attribution bar. Our hope is that as we begin to license this technology across the industry, that becomes a trust and safety standard, like a nutrition label on any form of content, so that when there's a generative response, consumers know where their nutrition and content calories are coming from. Secondly, in terms of this reference point, on GIST you get paid every time your content is used. The payment is proportional to the content, how much of the content in the answer comes from any given source. You're helping create the value in these answers. You need to be compensated when you are creating that value. The next thing we're doing is we've started to talk to a number of our partners about distributing GIST as part of a federated AI search and a trusted content network. Network effects are one of the most powerful moats for any industry, so that our content partners' content travels with GIST to other trusted sites, receiving the same attribution and the same revenue share wherever it appears. Because one of the things we've heard from a number of partners, and I know this has come up a couple times over the last 2 days, is that a single corpus is not enough to sustainably answer questions from consumers. And if the goal for this, as Nikita was referencing this morning, is to take back some control from Google, increase time on site, increase engagement, increase monetization, the critical thing is to answer as many of these questions as you can. And so what we're hearing from our partners, and honestly, I did not expect this to be the case, is they would prefer to have content from a series of trusted content partners. They would prefer that some percentage of revenue, some percentage of traffic might leak out to another premium content provider than knowing that if they can only answer 7 out of 10 questions, that user is almost certainly going right back to Google and not going to use this behavior on their site. Finally, the logical question when I say that we're doing proportional compensation for our partners based on revenue is revenue from what? So the last thing that we've done is we've actually created a new generative context-based advertising unit. Like many, and I think many of you are probably working on this, we're able to use the powers of generative AI to develop creative. A brand or an agency can upload brand content. We can create the creative, they can approve it, disapprove it, we store it in our servers. But what's different in the approach that we're able to take, because we have these content partnerships, because we've ingested in all of the content, both on GIST and on our partner sites, is the brands are then able to literally move a slider and indicate what sort of a context match they want. Maybe this is a reach campaign and they only need a 15% context match because they want the ad shared as broadly as possible. Maybe it's an acquisition campaign and they want a 95% context match. Because we know this content, we can do this on the basis of context, not cookie. So it doesn't matter where the user was an hour ago, a day ago, or a week ago. We can serve up the ad that's right for them at this time. So again, ProRata was founded to ensure that content creators are fairly credited and sustainably compensated in this age of generative AI. It's our goal to turn this from the extinction event on the left to the dawn of a new era. And I'm happy to talk to any of you more about how we can help you do that.